And welcome back. Today we're going to cut the profile on our doors and fit them to our bookcase. That sounds good. Stick around. You remember in the last episode we made our raised panel doors. Since you've been away, I've given the panels 2 coats of Osmo, the final finish, glued the doors together and rubbed them down to 120 grit. The next job is I want to put the profile around the edge of the door, the same profile that we used on the drawer front. Thing to note, when you made these, line them up on the bookcase where they're going to go, and just ensure that your doors are exactly the same width as the drawer units. And in my case, we're bang on, so we know we are good to go. If they weren't the same width of the drawer units, i.e. you've made them ever so slightly wider than you needed, set your router table up with a straight bit and using the jointing mode to just gradually bring the width of the door down so it perfectly lines up with your drawer. If you take the time to do that final finessing and fitting now, your doors will fit better when you put the hinges on. Otherwise you're always going to be fighting the door to try and get the thing to line up, and it won't look very good. Now you remember that when we made the drawers we used a test piece that cut the same profile onto this test piece that we've used on the drawers, and now we want to go ahead and use on the doors. I hope you kept this. I did put a message on the screen saying keep this piece of wood. We're going to use that now to set up the router table. So our router bit is now set into the table, exactly the same one that we used on the drawers. And now I want to set the height of this to make sure it gives me that same profile that we had on the drawers. Line up the profile with the router bit, which is there, and then lower the router in the table until your material is flat on the surface, which is going to be there. And can you see that the wood is now just rubbing on the router bit and just moving it, and that means that's lined up perfectly. So by keeping this piece of scrap, we now can set that to exactly the same position as it was for the drawers. I can now bring in the fence and I can line up this bearing so that's flush with the fence, and that is now set up in exactly the same position as it was when we cut the drawers. Now if you didn't keep this piece of wood, don't panic. Drop off one of your drawer fronts and use that to line up your router bit. But it is important that we get the same profile, the same depth on this, because we're trying to get that consistent look across our bookcase once we've got these doors on. Now we can make the cut. I'm obviously using the mitre table to support the size of the panel, and I'm making sure I'm clear, and I'm making sure that everything is set up for right angles, and it is. The panel's going to be face down, and we're going to start by making the cut across the grain, because remember we're allowing for tear out at the end, and then I'll do the long edge. So cross grain, long edge, cross grain, long edge, and we should be good to go. And if we do it right, we end up with a door that is looking really good. Raised panels, we've got this nice profile in there that's going to match the drawers beautifully. And if I offer it up to the bookcase, line up the edges of my drawers, that's how it starts to work. Looking good, looking tidy, looking square, and everything's looking really quite neat. So I'll cut the next one while I've got the router table set up, and we'll look at getting this fitted. I'm going to be using these Blum Hinges, B-L-U-M, quite a well-known manufacturer of these Euro style hinges. It comes in 2 parts. This part connects to your door. This cup here is actually recessed into your door, and then it's got these 2 mounting holes to screw it into place. This part clips to a plate that you mount inside the cabinet, and this is the plate in question. Now the Blum hinge range is fantastic. You're not going to get better quality hinges for your cabinets on the marketplace. They're a bit more expensive. You can get cheaper hinges, but you really do get what you pay for in these style of hinges. In the Blum range, you can get a hinge for absolutely everything that you can think of, and many things you didn't even know were going to be a problem or required a hinge. But that makes it very complicated when you first look into the world of Blum. There's some great tools and manuals on the website, but you need to understand what you're doing to drive those. Now in this video, at this moment in time, I'm not going to go through how I got to choosing these, and nor am I going to talk about how I get to the measurements we're going to use to mark out the doors. But if you're interested in that, stick around till after the closing credits on this video, and I will put a quick additional piece of content that will talk you through the website and how you get to these things and how you work out the measurements are. If that sounds good, stick around after the credits. If that's not something you're really interested in, let's crack on and get this door fitted. If you remember way back when in the episodes, before we'd even assemble this cabinet, we pre-drilled some holes using the Festool LR32 system. We drilled some holes to take some middle adjustable shelves if we wish to fit those, and we drilled some additional holes to take the hinges. That's where these plates come in. Now the distance between the mounting holes is 32 millimeters. It's all part of that Euro system that the LR32 system is designed for. So these now just simply screw on to those holes that we created earlier on. Now if you look at the plate, you can see there's two little marks here either side of the elongated hole that we're going to screw through, and that's just showing where the central point of these are. And the distance between those two holes is exactly 32 millimeters. That's why it's worthwhile spending the money on these things. So we know that's going to fit on there perfectly with no dramas. To do that, we're going to use the 5mm Euro screws, and you saw us use these on the Sysport build many months ago. They're exactly the same screws that we used then, and these are also designed to go with that 32mm European system. Now the advantage of the 32mm system is these have now come out square to the side, and they're mounted 37mm back, and now the hinges just clip onto those brackets. Like so. So what we need to do now is to mount these to the door. I'm going to find the center point in each bracket, and I'm just going to give myself a little line on the edge of the cabinet so I know where that center point is. Now this has not got to be accurate, it's got to be near enough, so be as precise as you can, but there is movement in these hinges up and down, so if you're fractions of a millimetre out, we can allow for that in the adjustment of the hinges, but try and get it right. The nearer you can get it, the better we're going to be. So I've now got a mark here on the edge and a mark in the same place on the top one that's just showing me the centre point of that bracket. I can now offer my door up to the cabinet. So what I'm looking to do here is to line this edge of the cabinet up with this inside edge here, and I'm resting that on top of my drawer, so I'm not yet allowing for that 4mm gap that we want. And now I can line that mark up that we made for the centre point onto the hinge onto my door. So now I have a mark here on my door and a mark here on my door, and those two marks are perfectly lined up with those brackets that we've just put onto the side cabinet. Just square those over so we can see them easily. Here and here, and I've also just put two little squiggles on to indicate that that is the top of my door. Now don't forget that one of the design features of our cabinets is this 4mm gap that we first put on between the drawer fronts, and we also discussed at length I want a 4mm gap between the top of the drawer and the bottom of the door. Now the marks that we just made on the doors is with the doors sitting flush against the top of the drawers. So I now want to raise the door up by 4mm. So in order to raise the door up, I need to drop this line down by 4mm, which is going to be there and there. So the lines I actually want to work to are those 4mm lines, not those original lines. Makes sense. Found the centre of the brackets, fitted the door flush, transferred those lines off, and then given myself a final adjustment of 4mm by moving the lines. Happy days. Now I know from the calculations I did on the Blum website that I want to make a centre point of 24.5mm, and that's the centre point that's going to allow me to drill out this door for the hinges. That's this piece here, this round part of the hinge goes into this hole. So I know that this centre point from this edge is 24.5. So I can come in at 24.5mm, which is there. 24.5, which is there. So where these two lines intersect now, that is the centre point that I'm going to drill for this particular installation. Now if you want to know how I got to those measurements, stick around after the credits at the end of this video and I'll do a quick overview of how I got to those measurements. Now I also need to allow for these holes, which are these holes here, for the screws that mount this to the door. I know that they are 9.5mm further on than the centre point of my bracket. So 24.5 plus 9.5 is going to equal 34. So I now want to come in with a second line at 34mm, which is going to be there. So my next job is to bore out this centre hole for this clip. The Blum dimensions also tell me I need to do this at 13mm. Now the hole that we need to bore out is 35mm, and it just so happens that in the LR32 system it comes with a 35mm bit. So we can put this onto our router, set the router to 13mm, set up for this centre hole here and this centre hole here, and bore this hinge out. Another advantage of the Festool LR32 system, it brings all the things you need together in one kit for this Euro style fittings. Just need to get my router out of the router table though. So we've got the bit mounted in the router, and I'm just going to zero this and set it for a depth of cut of 13mm. Zero that down, put one of these posts in place and just bring this down so it rests on top of that post, which is there. Make sure everything is nice and zeroed, and now I can raise up my depth stop to a reference point of 10, 11, 12, 13mm, which is there, and just fine tune that to make sure I'm okay. Now remember, it's 18mm pine, so as long as I'm not greater than 18mm, we should be okay. So I'm just going to use the fine adjustment to just set that to 13.5mm, just to give myself some clearance room, and that looks good to me. So now I can make the plunge down to the depth stop, and I've got a 13.5mm hole, 35mm wide, inside this board in the right place. So in order to do this, I'm going to use the reference guard so I can make this repeatable, so I know the position of this one is identical to the position of that one, and the same on the other door as well. I've extended the marks out so I can now line up my router with those centre marks, and then I can use this to actually hold that position in place. Just going to extend the centre line out a bit, and then I can use the little centre mark here to line me up left and right. And that gives you a nice bored hole, and then this simply pushes into place, and we can now screw that down. And then if our measurements have been good, this door should just slot onto these brackets. Let's see if that works. There's one. There's two. what do you think of that then? Got my beautiful 4mm gap. Everything's lined up and the door fits flush. We don't even need to adjust it, and that's, come on, that's pretty good. And again, I think that's down to the fact that we spent so much care and attention getting the bookcase level and getting everything nicely squared and everything lined up that we get results like that. And I'm really pleased with that. I've got my 4mm gap, the lines are good, love the flow of the grain. I mean, nothing more to say really. So I'll do the next one and get that one fitted, and then we'll see what we think. Good job. So there you have it, the cupboard doors are now fitted, looking pretty fine, I think. So that's it for today's episode. I'll drop the doorknobs on this, just drill through the bottom corners there, and next time we'll finish this off by just putting the top plinth on. Thanks for watching. Oh, and if you want to see the information about the Blum Hinges, stick around after these credits. See you soon. Oh, so you stuck around then. Okay, we're going to have a look at the Blum website. More importantly, the product configurator on the Blum website, and this helps us to choose the parts as well as working out some sizing. So go ahead and put in the website www.blum.com, and that takes you to the Blum homepage. Have the usual marketing information and product information on here, and that's all very interesting. Scroll down until you get to the product configurator. That's the tool that we are interested in. While we're here, there is an easy assembly app that helps you to understand the products available for assembling your furniture, your cabinets, always worth a browse, and then some devices that will actually help you to go ahead and do it. And if you do an awful lot of cabinet construction, again, this is worth looking at. But we're interested in the product configurator, so we click on that. That takes us to the product configurator homepage, and scroll down and you'll see an orange button here starting the e-service. Now this takes you into a portal, a second portal on the Blum website, but this one is application driven. And you can see there's a few applications here. There's a product configurator that we're going to look at, but there's also a cabinet planning application here that helps you design and plans, and you can actually put orders with them and track your orders and a few other bits and bobs here. If you want to, you can set up an account, and if you do that, that will keep track of your projects. We're not really interested in that today, so we're just going to go ahead as a guest and launch the product configurator. You can see the side menu then changes. If you do have projects and you've stored them because you created an account, they appear here. We're just going to create a new configuration. Accept the terms and conditions and click on next. Here you can get all the information you need about the various systems that Blum do, the lift systems, the hinge systems, the boxes they create, runners, etc. We're obviously interested for our project in hinges, so you click on the hinge system. It then asks you for some information about your projects. So what's your cabinet? Well, ours is a standard cabinet, and you can see this little symbol here is the recommended option as you go throughout this. So it's recommending a cabinet, and that's the right for us. But equally, there's blind corner cabinets, there's angle cabinets, and there's cabinets with bifold doors that you could select. We want a standard cabinet, so we'll select the standard cabinet. It then says, do you want to do an installation check? It's worthwhile clicking yes here, and again, that's the recommended option. The installation check is going to make sure that what you're choosing is compatible for the cabinets you're building, and that seems like a good idea. You can go off-piste a bit, and you can say no, and you can do the entire thing manually, but we'll use the automatic version. It now wants to know a little bit about the cabinet that we're building. So what's the material? Well, ours is going to be a wooden frame. What hinges do I want? Well, I want a standard hinge, and you can see the diagram there, how that's going to work. But I can have hinges for profile doors, for thin doors, for hinges with protrusions on them, wide angle opening, for refrigerators, glass mirror doors, aluminium doors, so on and so forth. We want a standard hinge, so we'll just click the standard hinge. It then wants to know a little bit about the application. So what am I using these hinges for? And again, there's a handy diagram that pops up on the right hand side that shows you what the applications are. Dual application, so I can use it either side of a panel. An inset application, so my door is inset into the cabinet itself. One with an adjacent frame on the front, one that's close to a wall, one that's overlaid so the door sits on the outside of the panel, one that's got things on both sides of the panels with two panels in the middle there, and one where you're actually putting hinges on both sides of the panel at the same time. I want an overlay application. I want my door to be on the front of my panels, so we're going to pick overlay application. It's then asking me for some more information. What's the width of my panel? Well, our panel is 500 millimeters wide. The height overall is 1015 millimeters. It's an 18 millimeter front. And it then wants to know how heavy is the panel. There's a handy calculator here that you can use to tell you that. So click on the icon and it puts the information you've already entered. So we know it's a hinge system, we know it's made of wood, the overall height, the width and the thickness. Now it's saying what material is your door made of? And you can see the selection there: balsa wood, veneer plywood, HDF, fibre, hardwood. And at the very bottom here we come down to softwood. Ours is made of pine, so that's softwood. It then gives me a density, and again this is also calculated so we don't need to worry about it. You could overwrite that if you wanted to. You could look at the material you're actually using, look at the density and come up with the figure there, but that's good enough for our reference. And what's the handle weight? Well, it's a small pine handle, so it's a nominal weight. And that will then come down and calculate it. So it's telling me that my door is weighing about 4.6 kilograms. And then you can apply that and it auto fills in the weight of your door. It now wants to know what are the thicknesses of your side panels. Well, our side panel is 18 millimeters. And then it's saying, so what's the gap? And on this diagram here, you can see the gap is referenced F. That's the gap that will be between the end of the door and the side panel. So if you wanted a 1 millimeter reveal on this side, make F 1 millimeter. I want my door to be flush. I want the side of this door to be flush with this one so it lines up with our drawer units. So I want 0 gap. It then wants to know about the front overlay. Now this is calculated it at 18 millimeters, and that would make sense because this is an 18 millimeter board and I want 0 gap, so it must be 18 millimeters. So that's fine. It's now telling me I need to put a door radius of 1 millimeter, and on this back corner here, that's where that radius would be. And to be honest with you, when I sanded this down, I just ran the sander down that and that gave me that 1 millimeter radius. It's then got this drilling distance of 7 millimeters. So it's telling me that this hinge here, this barrel part of the hinge, has got to be set back from the edge by 7 millimeters. And that's an important dimension that we just need to take notice of, 7 millimeters. It then's recommending some things. So it's saying I should really be using a mounting plate with a 0 millimeter distance and a boss overlay of 11 millimeters. A boss overlay is how far does this round part of the hinge protrude past this inner face. And that's obviously 11 millimeters because our drilling distance is 7 millimeters and 7 plus 11 is 18, which is the thickness of the overlay that we're using. And that's pretty much it. Now this is useful. It's telling me that I need 2 hinges for that weight of door, that size configuration. Click onto the next button. It's then got some options for you. Do you want the blue motion feature? That's where those doors slowly close, or just a standard feature where you don't have that soft close. Well, I like the blue motion, so we'll have that. Do I want them in nickel or do I want them in black? Well, I think nickel's going to be looking pretty. How do I want to fasten them? Do I want the inserter where they push down? Do I want the knock-in devices, the screw-on? Screw-on's good enough for our application. And it's now saying that's giving me an opening angle of 110 degrees, which is fine. 20 degrees past 19, you can see how that angle starts to look there, which is good. And it's recommending an unsprung hinge here, which is fine. It then says what sort of mounting plate do you want. Now remember, there was two parts. There was the hinge itself and there was a mounting plate. And now I can have a horizontal plate, or I can have the more traditional cruciform plate. Well, I like the idea of the cruciform plate because it gave me a bit of up and down movement as I fitted this to the carcass, and we want to be pretty precise on that 4mm gap between the drawer and the door, so I've gone for the cruciform plate. How do you want to fix it? Do you want to use inserter? Do you want to use expandos or knock-ins? No, I'll just screw it on, that's good enough for me. And it's now saying, so what are you going to use to screw it in? Chipboard screws or system screws? Well, we're using system screws. They're those 5mm screws that we looked at in the main video, so we'll be using those today. And therefore, it's now filled all my information in. And click on next. Do I want any accessories here? A tip-on is the Blum technology that gives you the push to open feature on the doors, but I don't really want that on this. I'll use pine handles, so I want that without, thank you. Do I want to stop it opening 86 degrees or allow for the 110? Well, 110 is good enough in our application. Do I want any fancy covers on my hinges? Well, no, that's okay. It's only a shop cabinet, so we'll ignore that. And then that comes up with the products that you need to buy. So you can then take this part number and just drop that into your web browser, Blum part number, and that'll give you a stockist near you. So that's telling you exactly what you now need to order for your application. Interestingly, if we were using this to create a cabinet, it would also give me cutting list information and some planning information and some advice around assembly. So if you are building cabinets, it's well worthwhile looking at this. And if you wish, you can export that into a PDF and take that with you. If we now navigate away from the tool, and remember that 7mm, obviously having captured the product numbers that we need, and we navigate over to the Clip Top Blue Motion homepage, and I'll leave a link for this in the main description. There's a useful catalogue here. Overview, menu, product range, manufacturing and assembly. If you go into the downloads and the videos and scroll down, scroll to the brochure selection and look at this concealed hinge brochure. You'll remember that in the main video I was using a small table. That table comes from page 2 of this brochure. And this is a useful brochure. It gives you lots of information about the hinges and what have you. It does allow you to calculate those distances we looked at manually by using the brochure, but I found the e-tool a lot quicker and easier. What I'm interested in is this center point. And remember, I had a center point of my hinge of 24.5mm with a screw fixing 9.5mm further on. This is where the information came from. We had a boring distance of 7mm that was told to us on that E-tool. So I now look at my boring distance, 7mm, go up, and that's telling me that my center point is 24.5mm. And that's where that measurement came from. So that's it. That's how you can quickly identify the Blum products that you need for your application and work out the sizing and the shape and what to order. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for sticking around for the bonus material. Any questions, drop them into the notes. See you soon.